Hello and welcome to Maximal Fire. I'm Alex Peake, attorney at law.
And I'm Judge Johnny.
And this is the Great AT Debate. Hello, Johnny. How you been, mate? It's been not so long, actually. We're doing all right with the regular meetups these days.
We've been very good. That calendar invite in our phones is still going strong. We're only occasionally missing dates.
Let's not, forget, brush over the fact that we did push it by a week. But it's in there.
Yeah,
it's in there.
Exactly.
It's forcing us to make content on a more regular basis. If you haven't already seen it, if you're not a member of Patreon or a YouTube member, then we just dropped a new sphere about 10 days ago. Some really good discussion on that around events that we both ran and attended for both Legions Imperialis and Adeptus Titanicus. So if that is your bag, head on over to Patreon or have a look at our YouTube members and you can pick up on all of the latest episodes. Much more casual, much more sort of laid back. Although we say that, we've got a little bit of light-hearted drama, courtroom drama, you could say, scheduled for today's episodes.
Oh yeah, the wigs are coming out. There's a gable somewhere that I'm sure we can bang or add the noise in post-process. It's going to be great, and we are going to argue about the rules behind plastic toys for possibly too long on our Monday evenings.
possibly to the point that it outstays its welcome. Mm-hmm. But no, I mean, as event organizers, we obviously put on events for both Legions Imperialis and Adeptus Titanicus, but we were actually planning our next event, which we've actually got in now. We're doing a Beachhead pre-tournament on September the 27th at Entoyment, and that's going to be an Adeptus Titanicus tournament in preparation for our big calendar Beachhead event next year. And we were kind of like going through all of the different rules which we wanted to include or think about or considerations, because this year at Beachhead we wanted to change things up a little bit, just sort of take what we feel is some of the best bits from Open Engine War and some of the best bits from Match Play and see if we can create like the ultimate Adeptus Titanicus tournament event
finely distilled rule pack.
Yeah. But it fast became obvious that there are so many rules out there which people have some very strong opinions on. And, if you've ever been on our Discord, there is often lots of conversation. Let's say conversation, not
Good
arguments.
Conversation. No,
it's it's rife between different metas having their own different opinions of how different rules should work, what is considered to be overpowered, what is considered to be underpowered, and what should be flat out banned or boosted within an event pack. Now, we have been always more on the line of not changing. Well, we have always considered less changes are better when it comes to Beachheads, because we like to, very self-aggrandizing this, but consider that event to be kind of like our sort of world GT, if you want to be that arrogant about it. Yes. We don't like to deviate too far from the rules which are put in place by GW, but the problem is that GW really aren't helping us here on the event scene. They released the match play guide, and then the match play guide is now evaporated into thin air. You can't get it anywhere. You can't get a downloadable PDF. Brilliant rule set, but it's just completely inaccessible. The Open Engine War cards are available. Very, very good they are, but there is some nuance to them which makes them a little bit trickier to run in a tournament setting, not to mention you're missing out on all of the rules within the match play guide which make AT the optimal play experience that you can have with that game. We also had a very frustrating FAQ document which dropped the other week. The less said about that, the better. It's not that, over the years, the community's been sending them thousands and thousands of rules queries, and they decided to address 2, was it? That they clarified Spider-Mech?
It was the most pointless, anticlimactic, because there'd been whispers that 80 FAQ was coming out for a while, right? And there's always whispers that an 80 FAQ is coming out, but when it was, I mean, if you don't laugh, you cry, right? And it was such a it's literally just 2 lines saying that spider bots can be taken, and that's it. That I think maybe rustled some feathers. No one in particular I'm talking about here, Alex, in the community. I was half expecting you to go scorched earth and start, screaming at them on socials and all of that. I was worried I might have to rein you
close.
in. I know.
I came close. We would normally jump on content like that when it comes out, but it was so minimal. Oh, look, spider bots work exactly how we kind of thought they would be working. That didn't take a nonce of didn't take an ounce of.
I said, don't attack them, all right? I know you're upset, but
it doesn't take an ounce of.
An ounce of
an ounce, definitely not a nonce.
No,
no. Work.
We're over like 2 minutes in, right? YouTube isn't going to demonetize this vid.
No. And it doesn't take an ounce of brains to work out how those banners were going to be worked. And the community in general is very good at a little bit of self-regulation for the most part. But yeah, massively disappointing FAQ. We have to publish our own FAQ. If you don't know about it, you can go onto our website, maximalfire.com, and in the resources section, there is a community FAQ, which we've curated over the last couple of years to try and address some of the more contentious subjects. But the problem is every local meta has their own way of doing things. And when you have an event, you're bringing together multiple different metas, and without any clear direction from Games Workshop, you need to have kind of a way of level setting the playing field. And so to do that, we put together our FAQ document. But as I said earlier, we don't like kind of saying this rule doesn't work like this anymore. We're changing this, or these points are changed, or we don't like messing around with that for general. But we try and make what we believe are sensible sort of FAQs, not errata, but how would that be played if you came to one of our events?
And I think you've struck it on the head there, is that we get a lot of people from kind of all over the world come to our events as well. So really a soft touch is kind of a much preferred route, I guess, when we're deciding on these rule amendments.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing as well is you don't want to be caught out by turning up to an event and not knowing the local or that event's way of ruling on things, because you can find yourself at a disadvantage if you're playing against somebody who uses that rule pack a lot, very familiar with that rule set, and then you find out that something doesn't work how you thought it was going to work, and all of a sudden the charge that you thought was going to be epic is just gone like a sad fart in church. But so we get lots of suggestions like, have you considered this? You should change that. Like, can you include this in your next event pack? And so we thought we would take some of these ideas that we see from the community and some of these general topics of conversation and try and argue the shit out of them. So we are going to kind of play a little bit of a sort of prosecution defendant kind of role with this, where some of the opinions might not necessarily align to our own personal opinions. So please don't attack us if we're being intentionally obtuse or something. But it would be very boring if we discussed this on an episode and we both were just in 100% agreement and it's like, yes, this should be done like this. Yes, I agree. Okay, on to the next one.
Yeah.
So we've got a load of these topics and we're going to go through them and we're going to argue about them. And then I guess it'll be up to you as to what you think is the right answer with some of these. And what we're really hoping for is we're going to see lots of things in the comments about how you are playing this, what your opinions on this, what you think is broken and what you think needs to be changed. Because at the end of the day, this game currently is very much left to the community to do its thing.
It's the longest unupdated. I mean, it's probably the longest single edition of any game currently available in Games Workshop. I can't think of a game that hasn't had an FAQ or rules changes or a whole new edition in the time that Titanicus has existed.
Necromunda's fairly old, isn't it? But it's like that's still been updated in time with new editions, new books, and new.
Often feels like weekly with Necromunda, you're getting releases. Although
but the core rule set is largely,
true,
pretty pure back to its roots. But yeah, it's been 7 years for Adeptus Titanicus, and although they've brought out lots of expansion since, I think it was 2022 was the last time that we had a proper FAQ update, and that was after the Traitor Legions book dropped. We didn't even get one after the campaign compendium dropped. So it's been a long time, and so we're basically left to self-regulate and try and come up with these with the ideas of how we best run these events ourselves. And so we'd love to hear your ideas, love to hear your thoughts, and we use that to continually evolve our FAQ. Although I will caveat by saying that we always try for a less is more with that FAQ. So there might be some obvious ones, but we don't like to be heavy-handed with it. Before we do so, though, got to do a little bit of admin. We've had a bumper month of new patrons, which is amazing. And not only that, we've had some new guys joining us on YouTube members. So just want to say a big shout out to Walter Dunt, Nick Wells, Velvet Mark, Richard Partridge Hicks, MacGuffin, and then our YouTube members. It's Just Gamble, Horser 2100, Andrew Turnbull, and Adian Botha. So thank you very much, guys, for supporting the show. Obviously, if you are a patron of Maximal Fire, you get access to our secret chat where we talk nonsense occasionally. We also do the New Sphere podcast, as I mentioned earlier, which gives you an extra hour of hobby podcast news to discuss, to listen to as we ramble on about random crap that we've been doing. And loads of discounts. You can get 15% off nameplates at Battle Builder, 10% off of Battle Bling. It's all round. Hopefully people find it a good offering. We've had plenty of people who've been with us for years, so they must be not doing something too wrong. But obviously, we say this all the time. We can't do it without our supporters. It covers everything that we need to do to release the content that we can. So thank you very much to all of our patrons, and we hope that more of you will choose to subscribe as well. And you can do that from as little as £1 or £3 if you want to watch the extra video content. So yes. Right. So I guess
over there, cue legally distinct Law and Order music.
Yeah. Not something that we're going to get sued over for using though, or get a copyright strike on. I'm not going to set that too much, because when I'm in post, I'll probably not find anything. Instead, it'll just be this awkward silence as we sit here, kind of like.
If there is the awkward silence, add crickets, and then we'll just sit here staring at the screen really intently for the next minute, and that'll be really good content.
Anyway, so Judge Johnny Court is in session.
Bang bang and whatever the hell else they do. Yeah.
So the first thing, and possibly the topic which has been coming up for as long as I can remember, with Adeptus Titanicus, is around weapons and their points. So the main one that comes up all the time is the Vulcan Megabolter is too good for the points, and it should be made more expensive. So the Vulcan Megabolter is 10 points at the moment, 6 dice, strength 4, rapid, 20 inches of range. It's a staple, right? I think that and the Plasma Blast Gun are considered to be the de facto best combination for a Warhound. It is known as the tournament pattern Warhound setup, and it is so prevalent that you very, very rarely, unless there is list building reasons to do so, see a different combination. Or it could just be you can't afford that, you need something cheaper, so you go for something else. But even when you go for something cheaper, you will often see the double Vulcan Megabolter Warhound turn up, which is arguably one of the second best loadouts that you can give to a Warhound. Now, things have changed in the last couple of years. The introduction of Legions Imperialis brought with it Shudder and Swarmer missiles, which did open up a little bit of variety on the shield stripping, because originally the Vulcan Megabolter was the shield stripper par excellence and the only thing really available to Warhounds. But we are like 18 months or so on now from the release of the Shudders and the Swarmers, and although you do see them in some lists like Regias, which promote that kind of long-range trading of firepower, the tournament Warhound is still very much here to stay. And I think people feel like we'll also cover the plasma blast gun here as well, because we hear the same thing. It's too good. It should be nerfed. So almost like for that's 30 points, and people are saying that that's too good. The Vulcan Megabolter is too cheap at 10 points. What do we do to fix the tournament pattern Warhounds, Johnny?
Well, so you agree that the Vulcan needs to be nerfed, do you?
Let's say that's. I'm happy to take that approach. If you want to be pro Vulcan, leaving it as it is.
He's grabbed the spade. Yeah, there we go. Right.
This does not represent our own personal opinions.
I don't think that it is strong enough to warrant a nerf as such. I don't think generally, I don't think the stats should really be touched at all. A points increase, potentially, but I don't know whether, although something being taken a lot is the sign of it being strong, because that's what a meta is about, I don't know whether it is that strong that you could solely rely on it. You don't see, so if we're just talking about the Vulcan Megabolter here, although yes, you see dual Vulcans, it's usually because it's the cheapest option, or one of the cheapest options, and it will do a job, which is go strip those shields. The moment shields are gone, unless you're facing knights, or unless you've got, you're obviously damaged Titans, you can start to wound with them. You're really looking for opportune moments in the latter half of the game to actually find uses for Vulcans. Vulcans require you to get up close to fully kind of benefit from their potential, especially with the rapid.
How often do you see a Warhound, Johnny, that doesn't get close?
True.
Not very often is the answer, right? Do you think that's because of the loadouts?
Role, though, and I think they put themselves by nature in a position that is more dangerous due to their weapon loadouts. It is not hard to kill a Warhound in Titanicus if you really want to. The issue with the Vulcan Megabolter Plasma Blast Gun is that if they are entirely left alone in favor of bigger, scarier targets, then suddenly once they're behind you and they've got that plasma death and the fishing for sixes that have killed many a Titan, is either because they've been ignored or not dealt with. And I think they should be treated properly as a threat, as opposed to just made worse so that people can, I don't know.
So here's my opinion why, here is my forced opinion. God, I hate this. Like,
I don't know if you ever at school or at college we had archaeology, and we were forced to do like fake debates, and I fucking hated it because it's so hard if you believe one way or another.
We decided to do an episode about it.
I know. We're gonna try it. We're gonna power through.
Here is why the Vulcan Megabolter is too good, right? It has a 20-inch range. Most deployment zones are sort of 10 inches, around that kind of mark on, right? You've got a a platform which can move 8 to 12 inches, it's very rare that you won't be able to bring those weapons to bear. The 6 dice, strength 4, with rapid, means that on an average dice roll, assuming that you're not within, I think it's 8 inches to get the +1 to hit, you're hitting 5 times. So as a shield stripper, there is no other Warhound loadout which can kind of do that as effectively. Like I said, maybe the Swarmers to a degree, but I still think that is the Swarmer is more expensive. That is still pound for pound the best. And you say strength 4 is not very, it's low. It can't do a lot of damage. It can death by 1,000 cuts because of the amount of dice that you are rolling, and also you can't discount its ability to be used in close combat because you're getting a +1 at short range.
Yep.
Which discounts the -1 for targeting a location. And if you're targeting a damaged location, then you might not even be just fishing for 6s. The Vulcan Megabolter is just so versatile because it doesn't have a blast or anything. It can be used to target locations. It can be used as a finisher. It can be used as a stripper. And for 10 points, I don't think pound for pound there is a more effective weapon in Adeptus Titanicus than the Vulcan Megabolter. You couple that with the Plasma Blast Gun at 30 points, so that's 40 points for your 2 weapons. You get a 2 dice blast, strength 8 maximal firing weapon, which means that say for instance that you were shooting another Warhound, there is a reality, right, where you can pretty much one shot a Warhound with that combination if your opponent's very unlucky with their dice roll. They're getting 5
Very
shield
unlucky.
saves that they got to make. They should pass enough to not drop their shield saves, but we've all seen it happen, right? That somebody absolutely spaffs their roll, shields go down straight away. And then on top of that, you follow it up with the Plasma Blast Gun, which is 2 dice with a template, strength 8 being potentially boosted up to strength 10. When you hit with both of those, and although yes, it's a -1 over long range, which is a little bit of a balancer, but it's still a 4 up to hit, and then you can still potentially hit because of the scatter rules, which is why I really do like blast weapons as much as I do. You can hit 4 dice worth of damage at strength 10 on a target. That gives warlords a bad day. I don't think that there is a better weapon combination in the game that can give you as much potential damage output as the Plasma Blast Gun and the Vulcan Megabolter. If you compare it to other weapons...
Interjection.
Sustained.
Okay. Would you, outside of edge case scenarios, like specific legios, would you ever take 2 Plasma Blast Guns, for example, or unless you're trying to skimp on points to Vulcan bolters, or are they only good when they're combined?
I think you can't deny how good they are combined. People do run them as double plasmas, and where I usually see this done is when you're squadroning Warhounds. So your first attack will come from a double Vulcan Megabolter Warhound, and their job is entirely to drop shields. And then the second Warhound is there to get the +1 to strength, because it's a combined fire. Mm-hmm. It's then rolling 4 dice worth of blast. So you're now strength 11 because of that. That's potential 8. I mean, you've got the randomness of the dice roll, right? And, the location dice to deal with. But that's potentially 8. And of course, even if you split that in half, that's still a potential of 4 on a single location in one hit. So, yes, there is definitely, reasons why you would take 2 plasmas on a Warhound. I've also seen it used. I know we don't really see kind of formations of legend as much as we, not Formations of Legend, that's Legions Imperialis, Titans of Legend, so much in AT anymore. But Ibn Farouk, the Warhound for Furians, I've seen him run. George used to do it a lot to me, so I've seen him run it a lot. Double plasmas, because he gets the bonus shooting at things like an additional point of strength, I think it is, for things larger scale. So again, similar kind of thing. You're boosting that strength to make the most out of those 2 plasmas, and let's not forget the fact that even 2 plasmas on its own, that's still potentially 8 shield hits. Like the plasma is not a bad shield stripper because of the amount of dice that you can apply to, a location or to a Titan or to some shields. You compare that with the turbo laser destroyer, right? 2 dice. Maximum strength 8. Okay, it's got range. You can do a lot of range, and it's got is it shield breaker, void breaker,
Shield Bane.
Shield Bane. But then you've got to push your reactor, and the reactor is possibly the biggest crux of a Warhound. That's your biggest liability, is pushing the reactor on your Warhound, and to do that for a weapon, and even then you're only getting a maximum of 2 hits. It doesn't come close. Like, no. Shudders have got an application if you want to quake things, but I consider them to be like a tertiary weapon that you take for effect rather than building a whole strategy around them. The Swarmers are good, but I think they lose a dice, don't they? Long range,
no rapid.
Obviously, don't have barrage as well, I don't believe, which is the thing which makes Apox so good at 5 dice. But so like the Shudders, the Shudders have got barrage, but the Swarmers don't. So you're still relying even at long range as well, because they don't have barrage. You're relying on direct lines of fire, and so you're more likely to get cover involved to make the most of that long range. So, yeah, I think they're both too expensive, too cheap for what they do. I don't know how you would nerf the Plasma Blast Gun. I don't really know how you would nerf the Vulcan Megabolter. The only thing you could do is change the points. But the argument that I've always had, and I'm going to flip my cap onto this is why we don't. We're going to flip over here for a second. The reason that you don't is because the moment you start messing around with points, you make something else the better thing. You don't solve the problem, you just move it. But I think even at 20 points and 40 points, up them by 10 for both of them, I think you would still see that loadout. Because it's still good.
Yeah. Here's the thing, in any competitive game, war game, whatever, there needs to be, and there has to be, a better option. Like, it's impossible to create a perfectly balanced rule set. You just can't do it. And it's just whether the strongest of the pack is feeling so strong because it is too strong when compared to everything else in the game. So, does the points of a tournament pattern Warhound have the same kind of scale of power to a similarly equipped Reaver? Does it specifically outshine things in its own size category? Do the points, I guess, match up as you get to the bigger and badder weapons and Titans as as you go on with your lists? It's a tricky one. I think it's hard to say, like, maybe just Plasma Blast Gun needs some form of heat penalty, perhaps.
Well, you already have that with Maximal Fire, but that's pretty forgiving.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
I think that the problem is some of the weapons don't work in AT how you expect them to. Like, the Plasma Blast Gun shouldn't be the Titan killer that it is. That should be the Turbo Laser Destructor. Now, there's no kind of engine killer trait in Adeptus Titanicus like you see in Legions Imperialis, and
because everything's meant to be an engine killer.
Well, yeah, but maybe like the turbo laser destructor would be better if that had a bonus of some kind to do damage against armor.
Yeah, just take away Shield Bane, give it Armored Bane.
It's like it doesn't even make sense that it's Shield Bane. Like it should have like an Armor Bane kind of rule, right? Where or I know Ordnance doesn't fit the kind of the way that they've written Ordnance, but like the re-rolling of wands or something, or Rend even might be useful on that to give you on a 6 you do even more damage. But yeah, like
so here's the question about the plasma blast gun. Do you remove 1 dice, or do you keep it as 2 dice but remove it as a template and just have it like the Sun Fury as a solid shot?
I don't know if removing the blasts makes it worse or better, to be honest, because then you can target.
Yes, but here's the issue with the blast is that you're getting those extra dice if you get a direct hit. So you're doubling your. But then I'm wondering, like, okay, well, if it's only 1 die, but you have the possibility of 2 hits if you manage to hit, does the points now feel too expensive?
Well, that's it. If you remove blast, you're potentially taking the damage output potential from 4 dice to 2, so you're halving its potential damage output. At that point, 30 points is far too expensive.
But does the ability to be able to target or
that makes it basically, if you think about it, if it becomes a strength 2 no blast strength 8 weapon with maximal fire, it's a slightly better version of the turbo laser destructor, which I don't know if that's a bad thing. They would at least be 2 sides of a similar coin, 1 long range but no maximal fire, 1 shorter range with maximal fire. Maybe.
Yeah.
I mean, we're going to discount like shock lances and Ursus claws because, like, for the most part, they're hot trash.
I mean, what's reminded of the melter cannon guns rule?
The incisor. Yeah. I think we were all hoping that would be a challenger for the plasma blast gun when it came out, but the fact of the matter is it's not.
I think I might might give them a bit more of a push to see if I can make them work, because I want them to work. I want them not to just be the tournament pattern and that's it. But yeah.
So what does the jury decide? I mean, the jury decides. Leave it as it fucking is.
I think the jury's going to decide that for everything.
The problem with this particular scenario is that there's a couple of additional things as well, right? There is some really good Legio traits out there which make them even better. Things like static rounds, which make Vulcan Megabolters even better. There's the one which increases the 3-inch blast to a 5-inch blast. Is that the more Daxis one?
Yeah.
Or is it a custom Legio one? I can't remember. But either way, like, they make better weapons better. Okay, you're kind of like paying a little bit of a premium for it, but even just slapping 15 points on the top for static rounds is still worth doing. And you compare that to, okay, you could say you can boost the long range of the laser destructor using the Tempesta special rule. Well, whoop-de-doo, it's already got like a really long range. It doesn't really bring anything else to the table. It doesn't really make that weapon better. That Tempestus rule makes the blasters, the Reaver scale weapon, much better. But even then, it's still quite expensive for what it is. So there's nothing really which is boosting the other weapons to make them a viable option, bar Audax making the Ursus Claw Strength 4. And again, to be honest, Ursus Claw probably should be Strength 4, and with Audax, it makes it Strength 5. Like, I don't think anybody would particularly mind that. And don't get me started on the bloody specialized trait.
Or specialized.
What the hell is the point of the specialized trait? Just
what were they thinking?
In the bin.
Yeah.
Get rid of it. But again, that's a rule that we haven't changed. It's something which makes absolute logical sense, because I don't think you need to be nerfing those sort of weapons with the specialized trait. We haven't removed it yet. However, maybe we'll add that one into our beachhead warm-up and see how it does. Because although it's thematic, it makes a bad weapon worse.
Yeah. And I think the scary thing about making these sorts of changes is it like mentally will make sense and you'll talk it through, and then you don't see like the knock-on effects. There's always that player that will consult the Excel spreadsheet that they've been putting together for the last 4 weeks that calculates the percentage.
I have a 49.3% chance that this is going to go my way.
This change actually improves the selection rate of blah 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 by blah 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 blah. Yeah, that's
we're not those. Right? We're not those people. And if you think that this debate is backed up by any kind of science or maths, you're in the wrong channel.
This is a vibes-based debate supported by absolutely no study whatsoever.
No. Let's we will caveat. I like to consider myself something of an Adeptus Titanicus aficionado by now. We've done a podcast and a YouTube channel for 4 years, been playing the game for longer.
Yeah,
I'd like to think I know what I'm talking about. Many people would argue against that. And I'm just looking forward to the torrent of abuse that I will get as a result of that comment now. So where do you stand on the? This has become more of a Warhound weapons question, right?
Yeah,
because the Vulcan Megabolter and the plasma blast gun ultimately makes the other weapons worse. So what do you do about it? How do you do it? Because the thing is, at least as it is, everybody has the option of taking that. There's not, if you're going to take a Warhound, it's never going to be a bad take to include that. You're never going to be like. It's like sometimes you take a weapon like, I don't know, a warlord might take a graviton.
Yeah.
And that serves a purpose for what it is. But then you might be thinking, oh, I wish I'd taken something else instead. So
like a volcano cannon would have been worth it for the blah 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 blah.
Yeah. Like, I think you were never going to go wrong with that, and everybody has it, so therefore it's a level, fair playing field. Like it's not like he's bought that bloody tournament pattern. Like, one arsehole.
There isn't like a community stigma against it, which is why I think it's okay to leave in. I think it's a pretty well-known fact that it is like a good loadout. I think Warhound weapons just as a whole just need sorting out, just entirely need redoing. There's some weapons there that you don't even look at for fear of making your win rate go down. What are the flamers called?
Oh the firestorms. The inferno guns.
One of the biggest drop balls in this game. If anyone, we're all mech lovers here, right? If anyone's played BattleTech, flame weapons in BattleTech don't do a lot of damage, but they increase your opponent's heat, which is a mechanic that we also share in Titanicus, and I don't know why there isn't a mechanic in Flamestorm weapons to increase the enemy Titan's heat. There's lots of weird stuff going on with the Warhound weapons where it feels like if you aren't taking, one or two tournament pattern, assuming you're building, a mana pool that allows you to have Warhounds. If you're not taking one or two tournament pattern Warhounds, you are just like actively sabotaging your game before you start. It often feels like that.
Which is less of a problem if you're playing narrative or if you're playing just friendly, right? If you go to an event, then you know that, okay, I'm taking a suboptimal list because I'm not choosing those weapons for my Warhounds.
And I like personally as a player, even at events, I don't want to go too heavy on stuff. I still like bringing my double missile Warhounds and stuff like that because it's fun and you can make this stuff work. And it's whether you want the challenge of making a less trim weapon on a Warhound work, or if you want the reliability that you're going to get out of a tournament pattern. Now, I think it's worth pointing out that they're two of the oldest weapons for Warhounds. So there has been a lot of experience in over the years of Titanicus in using these weapons and players feeling comfortable with them. And they
Sure.
have been very good from the start. So a lot of people have just been using them. So
made better by mana pools like the Ferox.
Exactly. Whether there just hasn't been enough experience with stuff like the Melters and the Volkites that actually, if you run them a certain way, or if you have to maybe mentally change up your playstyle with Warhounds to accommodate these new weapons. Because I think a lot of what we look at Warhounds is from the idea of, okay, this thing's going to be mounted with a Vulcan Megabolter and a Plasma Blast Gun. I think maybe there's something needed to actually change your mindset on them a little bit and figure out a way that they can be used. Like, long range skirmishes with the new missiles, which was one that was easily and quickly picked up on.
But that is probably one of the few cases where they've gone, there's an application there.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to now use that because, in things like the Regia, having the Warhounds stay back felt a bit, like the polar opposite of what a Warhound would do, because you needed to close the distance.
You, as someone who ran it for my Tritonus, you had to take turbo laser destructors, which sucked because you don't want to take turbo laser destructors, because why the hell would you when you had the Plasma Blast Gun? But you needed the range because you needed to stay near your Warhounds to make use of the mana pool.
Yeah.
So it actively made the mana pool not as good as it is now, where Warhounds do have those longer range weapons. It's a tricky one, isn't it? It really is.
Off to a good start, I think.
Off to a good start. I don't like making.
We could probably make a
changes.
whole episode just talking about Warhound weapons. To be honest,
We really could.
Part that's idea for the next one.
Yeah.
But we're going to move on because we've got quite a few of these we want to talk about, and this one is going to be this next one is more what we kind of see when we're talking about competitive events. So Titanicus tournaments, because you wouldn't often take this if you weren't playing to be competitive, and the subject of this is tertiary objectives. Now, the growing consensus in the AT community is tertiary objectives should be banned from competitive events.
Are you leaving that open for me?
You know my opinion on this, because I was pushing for the change.
It's very funny because this entire episode spawned off our frantic WhatsApp argument about tertiary objectives, specifically not a quick kill. What is it?
A score to settle.
Score to settle. Where well, do you want to explain your reasoning for dropping it from the pack first? Or?
Yeah, sure. So, to be honest, if you turn up to a tournament and you haven't got a score to settle as one of your stratagems, you are potentially throwing a game, because you can score 5 victory points by playing Adeptus Titanicus. What a score to settle does, and I know this is just one of the tertiary objectives, but we kind of feel like it's tough to just do you do just that one, or do you do all of them? Like, do you just say all of the tertiary objectives should be banned, or just a score to settle? Let's start by talking about just banning a score to settle, and we can move into more from there. A score to settle gives you up to 5 victory points, 1 victory point per Titan you kill. Okay, so it costs 1 stratagem point to play at the end of the game, so it's one of the cheaper tertiary strats to play. And you gain 3 victory points by playing the game as you're supposed to, by killing Titans. Now, obviously they've clarified it with the match play guide, which is good, because historically speaking, that was like 3 points on top of what you could get from your primary and your secondary. So we often would see people kind of capping out at 40 points, but then there would be somebody else with 45 because they'd taken a score to settle and got 5 extra victory points. That's a huge difference. Like, our friend of the show, Stu, he took it to Beachheads, and every game he played, when he won, I think the last time he won Beachhead, he had a flawless score, 40 victory points each game, which meant that over 5 games, he scored 25 additional victory points, which is the equivalent of a whole extra primary objective in Open Engine War. So just from playing the game well, And if you now with the match play guide, it does at least say that your tertiary objectives and your secondary objectives are combined, so you can score a maximum of 15 points to score your to be allocated between your tertiary and your secondary. So it means that if your secondary is not going well, you can top up your secondary score by killing Titans. So maybe you only score 10 points for your secondary, but if you've got score to settle and you've killed five knights or 4 knights and a banner, then well, now you're back up to 15 and you've now scored full victory points a game. So it's definitely one of those things where most people know that it's something that I should, if I want to play competitively, I should include that. I should hold off one stratagem point to play that later on in the game. My main reason for kind of feeling like it should be banned, like just excluded from our competitive events, is a bit boring. Like, you're getting 3 points for playing the game. Like, some of the other tertiary objectives are at least more nuanced. So, like, it could be you have to kill a certain amount of Titans in close combat, or by, headshots or something like that. I can't remember. I don't know the tertiary objectives particularly well, because there's only one that you ever should bother taking, and that's a score to settle by, which is by far the easiest and one of the cheapest. Some of them cost 2 stratagem points. You can also get some tertiary objectives as part of your Legio Princeps traits, like if you would ever want to do that. But again, why would you bother? You've got score to settle. It's worth potential 5 extra VPs for 1 stratagem point. So I feel like it should be, that specifically should be removed, because it's just a bit it's just boring. It's dull. Like, play the game and use the stratagem points in the game to affect the game, rather than like holding off that one which you just get points for killing Titans and playing the game.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. No. I have softened on this slightly, but I still think it should be left. Here's my reasoning. Technically, although yes, you should be killing Titans as a part of Adeptus Titanicus, there is no inbuilt mechanism, barring specific missions that you are playing and potentially secondary objectives, that reward you for killing enemy Titans. Killing enemy Titans just makes your primary goal, which is usually capturing something, easier, because then they're not shooting at you, they're not in the way, etc., etc.
With the exception, so just for the clarity of the audience, like, you have there is a primary mission, which is just a kill mission in Open Engine War. That was obviously removed for match play, and that became a secondary objective, where you have to kill like 30% plus of your opponent's force.
Yes.
So you're talking mostly from the perspective of primary missions in match play guide here.
Yes, exactly.
Or the majority of missions that you would come across.
Yeah, exactly. The majority of missions you'd come across, you're not actively being rewarded. I'm not saying it's a byproduct, but it just helps you on your way, right? I think it is often better to do an all or nothing approach than it is to just single out certain things and ban them, because the moment you pick a score to settle to go, then the next best one's gonna immediately take its place, because you are converting command points to potential victory points. Because here's the other thing as well, you're not guaranteed to be scoring those victory points if you're doing really well anyway, or if you're doing really badly, they're not something that's gonna, unless it's an even game, they're not going to. Those 5 points aren't going to propel you to a victory from falling behind. So I don't think, although they are something that is boringly taken by everyone as a safety pick every game, you are still having to spend a CP on it. Which, there's a couple of very good 1 CP stratagems out there.
Stratagem points, wrong game.
Stratagem points. I'm saying command points, aren't I? Been playing way too much Age of Sigmar recently.
Take your dirty mainline games out of your mouth.
Stratagem points. Okay, here we go. Right, stratagem points. You're spending stratagem points on doing this as well, and there are a lot of good stratagems that can be used for one stratagem point. I think it is just whenever I go to an event and I see like a list of like custom, we're banning this because we don't like it, we're banning this because we don't like it, we're banning this because we don't like it, it immediately like just puts me off. And I understand why it's done, and I know that people want to. So
you're saying that there is an impact to player agency?
I think so, and I think although a lot of the opinion of the upper echelons of Titanicus players say that it's a no-brainer and you should always bring it, I would be very interested to see data on maybe on the next Beachhead or whenever we allow it again, if we allow it again, to see actually how often it is taken as a stratagem, and then on top of that, how often
where did those people place based
where
on
those people's place, and how often it was actually converted into a score that wasn't already capped out by secondaries, because that's a small. You're only capping out your secondaries with it as well, so it's a small pool of points to actually fully cap out. So although I think a lot of very solid AT players just think, well, I'd rather have that extra stratagem point, let's just bin it, because everyone's going to take it. Actually, not everyone's going to take it. Some people, especially players with, more expensive stratagems, or legios that have more expensive stratagems, even, might elect not to take it and hope that, their tertiary objective is still a score to settle, and they want to settle that score before their opponent can score any objectives by wiping them off the board, and not having to worry about those extra 5 points in the tertiary, because that's all it is. It's insurance that if your secondary or if your game doesn't go too well, at least you would hope you'd have killed a couple of Titans. So I don't think it is game impacting enough. Aside from it being whether it's taken a lot or whether it's hardly taken, I think on paper and in reality, I don't think it's game affecting and game changing and game breaking enough to be worthy of a ban or a removal from an event.
So there's a similar theme here, right, with what we were talking about before with the Warhound weapons. Like you remove something or you nerf something else takes its place, and you just move the dial from one place to another. So with tertiary objectives, like, do you ban just score for satellite? I feel like you're saying you either don't touch them at all, or if you're going to do anything, you ban all of them.
Yeah, and sorry to the people that have, legios that take tertiary objectives, unless you specifically just allow tertiaries to be taken by those legios. But again, there's another
that would possibly move the dial, wouldn't it?
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah, you would possibly see people taking those legios because they can gain a potential bonus by 3 points from their legio trait. So yeah, I when I approached this, and this was like in discussion for this event on the 27th of September, I was approaching it not so much because I think that they should be like removed. A lot of things like this I consider as ways of changing up the meta. Like, I don't like sitting on Beachhead being a static event, which is the same every single time with the same, rules pack. I like to mix it up, new points, or so we have
formats.
We have like our own restrictions built in using our eras concept, right? Where we say this is a tournament which is early, mid, or late war, and based on early, mid, or late, it allows you certain different options available to you for that one. So Beachhead next year is going to be a mid war, which means that whereas in this year's Beachhead there was no corruptions allowed, there was no Psi Titans, there was no Warbringers, no vortex missiles, now those corruptions and vortex missiles are allowed back into the game. So it's not so much about changing it up or banning these things because we think that they are particularly overpowered or broken, but it is a way of keeping Adeptus Titanicus feeling a little bit fresh and a little bit different, because there's only so many events that are done every year. We're very lucky in the UK that we have a busy AT calendar compared to a lot of places. But ultimately, kind of like the reason that we put these changes in is to mix it up, because we're not getting the same support. Spiderbots is what we were talking about, right? They came in, they gave people a few more options, but they didn't all of a sudden run away with it. Which, to be honest, I'm pretty happy that they didn't come in and break the game completely. And they were very mixed at Beachhead between bottom of the table to all the way up to the top. But when we look at tertiaries, it's all about we look at these things not to restrict players, but to give them a different experience. This is what they're used to experiencing. I want you to think more about what you're going to do next time, how you're going to play your game. Like Beachhead this year, we did 1950. Why did we do 1950? Because everyone's got a 2,000 point list. Okay, so now you've got to think about your list because you've got 50 points less to spend. So what are you dropping? What is taking that place? So that's the reason why we do it. But yeah, what's your opinion on tertiaries? Do you use tertiaries that come up very often? Don't know. Like, let's see what the community think on this. Do you think that score to settle should be banned, or do you think we should go whole hog with banning all tertiaries, or leave it as it is? Stop breaking it, boys.
Leave it as it is.
Okay, next up, Warbringers are too expensive and underpowered compared to other Titans and need to be boosted.
I mean, yeah. But
so up until now, we've not touched anything to do with Warbringers, right? We just leave it as it is. The common thing which seems to happen, or the common opinion on the in the community, is you leave them as they are, but you give them free tracking gyros on their carapace mounted weapon. So normally you'd have to pay for the Warbringer and the extra 25 points for the turntable, for the tracking gyros. You give them free tracking gyros, give them arc line of sight. And this ultimately was fed by Games Workshop, because back when the Loyalist book was released, in the weapon charts at the back, it quoted the Warbringer carapace weapons as arc and not as corridor. So this is what put this idea in people's heads. And then by the time that the Traitor Legions book came out, they had replaced it again and they'd gone back to corridor. But this idea that you should give them free tracking gyros kind of hasn't gone away, and effectively means that the Warbringer is 25 points cheaper as it is. Which side do you come down on this particular subject?
I really like Warbringers. I 100% think that they should be getting tracking gyros for free. The bloody model has one, like a turntable literally modelled on it. It should be no questions. This is your artillery Titan. I think it can be an absolute menace in the right mana pool with the right loadout. But I think to get that right loadout, i.e., it is Arcus that is the one that uses Warhounds as spotters, right?
Yeah, the main two are Arcus and Ruptura. Are probably you've got the Precept as well, but I think that the Arcus and the Ruptura are the Warbringer centric or heavy mana pool lists.
Yeah, I'm a very big fan of the Arcus and loading up on dual volcano cannons and then a quake or triple volcano cannons, which is silly, but in the right combinations they are absolute menaces. However, to get to those right combinations, you are spending a good deal of points on top of what is already quite an expensive Reaver equivalent chassis. I don't know whether, I think they're too expensive. I don't know about underpowered, but I don't know whether they are too expensive or underpowered enough to warrant any action actually being taken to address it in any sort of event pack, aside from the free tracking gyros, which I still think is an oversight that then the next person that came along that did Traitor Legions just didn't even consider. I really think
they
that
fall
was
into an
it.
odd place in the game, don't they? Because they're more expensive than Reavers and they're cheaper than Warlords, but not by much in both regards. And you could argue that the limited weapon options available to the Warbringer, because you can only take the Bellicosa or the Mori up top, you can only take ranged Reaver weapons, so there's no close combat options available for it.
Not that you'd want.
Not that you'd want to, but like, you know, there's limitations on what it can take. You know, why would you, you know, choose that over, you know, going for the bigger? It doesn't. It's an underpowered Warlord or an expensive Reaver. Is really where they kind of come in. Again, I don't particularly agree with this point, but I'll argue it anyway. So, yeah, so they basically, you know, they are overcosted for what they are and what they do, because they're arguably too expensive and not good enough in the game. But then on the flip side of it, you've got the Arcus Maniple and you've got the Ruptura Maniple in particular, and the Arcus, as you've already said, that allows you to indirect fire with all of the weapons on the regardless of what it is, which is a bit dumb if you think that they're going full kind of like AK-47 in the air with a Gatling,
So
like, shooting a -2 over a building as they.
My mental image for this, because it's bothered me a lot recently, and the way I like placate my inner nerd rage about this rules interaction is that the Warhounds are like, shoot right there, and then they just either with their volcano cannons or their Gattlers just like focus in one like location and fuck any building that's in the way of this shot until it punches through and hits the target on the other side, right? Just like creating like this hole that's going across the board, which is dumb in itself, but it's Warhammer, right? Like, you know, you can't take the lore too seriously.
But obviously there's that, and also the blast weapons don't deviate as far. They only deviate D6, which is massive for a 5-inch pie plate, because unless you're rolling like big numbers, you're more or less, you know, guaranteeing that you're going to hit at least once, and you're certainly, you know, 1, 2, 3 inches. If you're rolling that, you get a nice helpful direction. That might still be, if it's targeting something like a Warlord, it might still be whole on the model, depending on when you targeted.
Meanwhile, this dude could be stood behind a building, happy as Larry the entire game, hidden from sight, anything.
And then you've got the Ruptura, which uses 2 Warbringers. So it actually is one of the more expensive maniples, because you need to take 2 Warbringers and I think it's only the Extergimus is more expensive, and a Reaver to make up your minimum components, or maybe the Myrmidon is more expensive. But anyway, and what that does is when you kill something with a Warbringer, all of the Reavers can act like it's the movement phase, and that is insane when you get that off. It's something which might not necessarily happen, but you would obviously build your list to give yourself the best shot that you're going to be doing finishing damage on a Warbringer, because if you've got 3 Reavers on charge, guess what? They can all charge again, which is just like that. I remember I took a Ruptura, Lanascara Ruptura, to Beachhead, the team event, and I played Johnny for one of the game, and he was like, when that happened, that was it. You won the game after that, because you got a whole extra turn of charges off, which was insane. And the Arcus itself is a very good minimum maniple, because it's not too expensive to take 2 Warhounds and a Warbringer, and it offers a lot of versatility, you know, and gives you great options as well as a ranged fire base. If you took that with a Ferox or something, or if you wanted to go a bit lighter, like I can see that being very good on like Solaria or something. You've probably still got a tournament pattern Warhound as well. So if you start giving it stuff for free, then do you make those mana pools more popular? And does that basically mean, especially with the Ruptura, you're saving 50 points essentially on across two of those on the Ruptura? Yep. Does that make an already very powerful mana pool even more powerful?
I mean,
yes,
yeah, right. Like there is no,
do we
you
care?
can't. Yeah, do we care? That's the big thing, right? I think on its own, in a vacuum, yes, the Warbringer is overcosted. Yes, you have to spend a lot to give it, especially if we're going rules as written. You're adding the gyro in as well. Yes, it is an expensive piece, but this is not like a Warhound and a Warhound level of argument where you're building a list around a Warhound, unless you're playing Audax or Munch Runner Hunting Pack, whatever, right? If you're bringing Warbringers, you're probably, or at least a good part of your strategy, is going to be focused around making the most out of that Warbringer, right? I would advise against just bringing one for the sake of bringing it, as an auxiliary Titan or something like that, right? So I think on their own, yes, but when they're combined with either one of those mana pools, they can really kind of dictate games and become a bit of a menace. They are a good, cheaper firing platform than a warlord. Although their guns aren't quite as punchy. I think the 1 or 2 strength differences in a lot of these cases, doesn't really match up against the reliability that they provide.
You're getting kind of like half a Reaver, half a Warlord, aren't you? Because you're getting one of the Warlord's weapons and the rest of Reaver weapons. You're getting no top hat weapons like you would get on a Warlord. The Warlord is a versatile all-round platform. The Warbringer is harder to be that versatile because there's lots of problems with range. So if you take the Quake up top, unless you do the expensive one and put the Bellicosa, which is good at any range, your Quake is suffering penalties under 24 inches. But then if you take that with something like a Gatling to act as a finisher, if you want to do that in a what's it called, in a Ruptura, then that can only shoot 24 inches. So one weapon is good, one weapon is bad, and there's no synchronicity between that unless you are, like you were saying, just go whole hog and just do all pies, like loads of volcano cannons, but then you're going to be running the risk of going hot, right?
Which is why you bring Frozen Soul for 15 points and
which is now basically free for you because you've given it a
tracking gyro.
Free tracking.
Yep, and then if you really want to make sure that you don't blow up your own Warbringer or you're bringing a triple volcano, you take the 1 SP plasma generator, is it? The bit that you get
asset
with the original Titanicus box. You stick. It's not going to be moving. It's going to be staying exactly where it is and just shooting for the entire game. And you just stick it near that plasma generator and just let it eat heat.
Siphon.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'll be honest. My personal opinion is I agree with you. I think that you give it free tracking gyros, it kind of fixes the Warbringer. That is a change for our next event, which we're going to allow free tracking gyros. I think that is a sensible change without fiddling with points. I hate and massively against any kind of fiddling with points, but you are kind of fiddling with points, but not by giving it a free piece of upgrade, basically just changing one slight change. And if this was a custom Legio, of course, well, you can get your tracking gyros even cheaper. So it's how much are you really saving? It's 15 to 25 points, something like that. But a lot of events do that. They haven't reported any problems so far. We've never done it because we've always kind of Just notice how high up my microphone is, covering half of my face. We like to kind of, like I say, be cautious, but we were going to give that one a go. So, are you a fan of the Warbringer? I know that Dan Robinson, who won the last Beachhead, certainly is. He loves his Vulturum Rupturers, and he loves Warbringers. He's been actively campaigning for this change. I think I'm about ready to sort of give it a go and see what kind of happens.
That's the thing as well, is making these changes makes events a little bit more interesting. You need to be a little bit more eagle-eyed with the lists that get submitted, because not everyone reads the event pack. So, yeah, always is a little bit trickier, but it's definitely worth it, I think, in this situation.
Okay, we are going to take a quick break to do some news from our sponsors, and we've got plenty more questions which we are going to be talking about in part 2. Okay, sponsors news. Thank you to everybody who sponsors the show. Really appreciate the support. Again, it makes our lives a little bit, easier to run this sort of stuff with a bit of support from our sponsors. In return, we let you guys know all the latest comings and goings of people who are directly influencing and helping build the epic scale community. Our first one is Battle Bling. Been with us since the beginning of time. They were actually closed for a little bit in May. They had some holidays that they had to negotiate around, and they've reopened in June. And I think Johnny is now swamped with new orders coming in. Not at all helped by the fact that there is currently a 15% off everything offer using the code KABLAMO. Great code. Well done, Johnny. Code. Available in store now. There is no current end date to that, but I would assume if you want to get something from Battle Bling, use that code before the end of June. I can't see it lasting much longer than that. If there's Warbreakers available, I think they're also available on Warbreakers. Of course, if you do buy anything from Battle Bling, please remember to use our affiliate link, which is down in the comments, and we get a little bit of a kickback from that as well. So do check out Battle Bling for all of your Horus Heresy, Adeptus Titanicus, Legions Imperialis, third-party custom parts and weapons and all sorts.
Bases.
It is a happy fun land of customizations for your little epic toys. Next up, Troublemaker Games. So they don't have any new news as such, but they gave me a few bits to kind of hint at. They've got a new Kickstarter dropping soon. So Troublemaker Games, they have their own version of Big Stompy Robots called City Crushers, which is their game that they did through Kickstarter, is now available through Vanguard Miniatures. Great little quirky sort of orc style Titan game, and they're continuing to evolve that, and I think there's a lot more to come from City Crushers in the future. But they're also a really good source of plastic terrain options for Adeptus Titanicus and Legions Imperialis scale. In fact, I think probably half of our terrain that we have is made up of the Troublemaker Games plastic stuff. It's super affordable, and it is really, really nice as well. I was gifted the City Streets set for a full 5x4 by Ben at Troublemaker Games. I'm currently in the process of trying to put together a full board of that. That was their last Kickstarter. I got a little bit distracted, though, because I had this long-standing project with them, which I bought with my own money probably about 18 months ago, a ton of stuff to make a set of fortress walls. And I've finally finished my fortress walls, and I am very pleased.
So sick. They look so cool.
I completely, I think I've made them far too big to be useful in the game.
There'd be good backing for a bat rep maybe, or something like that.
It will look really, really good. I think it's just about big enough that you can move Titans over it if you're playing AT. Certainly not a tournament terrain piece, but narrative games, I think it'll be really good for that, and I'm really looking forward to getting that used for the first for the first time.
Another penny in the
soon.
jar for how do I get my Titan through this wall at a tournament?
Yeah, that came up in the last one. So yeah, well, I'll hopefully you shall see some pictures of what we've been working on the screen. But yeah, all I can say about the new Kickstarter that's coming from Troublemaker Games is I think if you're a Mechanicus fan, that's there might be something in that which might pique your interests. I can't say anything more now, but I saw that and got a little bit of a stiffy.
How cryptic.
Yeah. And then last up, we have our last two sponsors, Grimdark Terrain and Rock Minis. No new news from those guys, but they are, Grimdark Terrain are the sort of providers par excellence of downloadable STL terrain for epic scale minis. They offer a monthly subscription, which means that you can get the latest offerings at a cut down amount, and often he will reduce part of the time through the year, like Black Friday sales, you'll be able to get some of his previous packs at a massive cut down discount as well. Really, really good terrain. We've got, again, quite a lot of that stuff in our collection as well. And if you can't print them yourself, you can go to our other sponsors, Rock Minis, who are specialize in both resin and FDM printing. They have a license for Grimdark Terrain, so you can get your Grimdark Terrain stuff from them as well. Okay, Johnny, I suppose it is back to the debate.
Back to the courtroom.
Right, next up is one which I think is borderline kind of going to get people kind of... This is something when it comes up that people will be sort of jumping across a table over, I think. Dominant strategist is a toxic a toxic trait and should be banned from competitive events. Again, not my words, but which side of the fence are you coming down on this one, Johnny?
I will say, for the purposes of this, I'm going to say leave it. And the reason I'm going to say leave it is because both players have access to it. That being said, I understand the strength of it. Just being able to just take an activation
at any phase of the game as well.
At any phase of the game is very, very good. I think a lot could be done to make it feel a lot less bad if we tweaked it. If it was tweaked slightly, where maybe it doesn't stop people from using stratagems, or it was purely an initiative.
You could tweak it by just saying it has to be used in the stratagem phase.
Yes, but then, yeah.
I think one of the things which is so strong about the use of dominant strategist is you can telegraph everything that you're going to do, and then they go, no, I'm going to take that off of you. So you use it in the movement phase, right? You know that person's going to charge. I'm going to dominant strategist actually, and I'm going to move out the way. Or as it was used against me, we played. If you listen to our latest newsfeed, we played a couple of really great doubles games up in Leighton Buzzard about a month or so ago, and it was used against me in the combat phase. I had a Reaver on full strides, which pretty much the linchpin of my strategy. I had the initiative. They dominant strategist and took the initiative off me in the combat phase, and was able to kill that Reaver before he could move out of the way, because the intention was that he was going to full stride straight past their gun line, and then he wouldn't have been a target anymore. So I wanted to do that to get out of the way. They dominant strategist killed it before it could kind of do what it needed to do, and that ultimately was when that lost us the game, I think, at that point, based on how that game went. We did lose that one. But this is my, I do agree. Like, I don't like messing with it. You say everyone's available, but I think it's available to everyone, but if you have multiple mana pools, you're more likely to have it because you have it as your extra trait. You have something that's good. Like if I took Gryphonicus, right, and I took 2 minimum mana pools, I'm going to take the combination of Reckless Maverick and Dominant Strategist, and that's just a horrible combination. I'm getting 2 good traits out of that, but it is available to everybody. But if you are somebody who runs 1 Legio, one mana pool, like if you are doing a Ruptura, for instance, you're incentivized to have 1 mana pool. If you're running an Extergimus, you're incentivized to have 1 mana pool. Then you're probably less likely to take it because you probably want to take other things instead. To kind of like Dominant Strategist is a win more strat, and it is. I think there's probably only 1 more trait out there, which I would say is as good and as game breaking, and that is Reckless Maverick. But Reckless Maverick at least costs you 3 hit points of heat to do it, so there is a downside to that trait. Whereas Dominant Strategist is just, I'll take that, thank you very much.
So, I think it is very hard to argue for keeping it as is. That being said, I think it is good because here's the thing, the other vanilla traits aren't anything too exciting, right?
I think Favoured by Fortune is always a good take, especially if you're taking Warlords, where you've got big weapons, like being able to reroll in the combat phase, or a dice, and it's a Bellicosa, for instance. You want that to hit. I think that anything that gives you a reroll is good. Some of them less so, right? But we live in a world where you don't randomly roll for these things anymore. You pick. Like that was the change that the match play guide introduced. You pick the ones that you want. You're not randomly rolling on a table.
So my argument for this would be: does it not help the weaker Legios with the weaker Princeps traits to be able to contend? And again, we're only talking about a Princeps trait here, but to be able to contend with some of the other auto takes from the stronger Legios, which often and coincidentally have the better Princeps traits.
I'm sure that there is exceptions to what I'm going to say, and I'm probably thinking it's going to be things like, off the top of my head, Astroman, or maybe Lysander Oberon, maybe. But for the most part, the way that the rules have been written, you either have really strong traits or you have really good Princeps abilities. Like if you take Gryphonicus as an example, right? Let's ignore the fact that they can. Well, can't really ignore the fact they have one. They have one great trait, which is the Reaver swap, and let's not. That is very good. But the other things which they have for it are fairly kind of middling. The 25 points for the plating you never take. The locos you probably would, but it gets expensive if you want to do it. And why would you do that when you can pay for experimental locos? Lust for Glory is arguably very good, but it can be. It's not something you can bank on because you lose it as soon as somebody else targets stuff, and you can't ever guarantee or bank your entire strategy on going one-on-one for Titans. To be fair, it's probably a bad example because they are a very
you're like
good
in your head,
Legion.
you're like listing out more and more, and you're like, shit.
But then they have one really strong Princeps trait. Now, if you go back and you go to like Furians, you have a really naff traits for the Princeps, but their package of things that they have available to them, the rerolls from that praying ability, the hunting auspex in particular, that they have a really strong set of Legio rules, and there is often kind of a little bit of a correlation between stronger Legio sets versus stronger Princeps traits. I know that is not exhaustive across the list, But if you've got strong traits, you're less likely to also see strong princeps traits, I think is what I'm kind of coming down to.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Does it need tweaking? Yes. I think the current way it's being played, where you can interrupt any point, any phase, I would agree is toxic. It is something that would create a feels bad experience for your opponent, hands down. I could argue that Vox Blackout, and we're going to get to that very shortly, would fall under the same feel bad argument. However,
but there are scenarios where you could go a whole game and not use that trait.
Absolutely, and there's also, I think it's definitely not an auto take if you're running one, like you said, if you're running one mana pool. If you're running 2 mana pools, then the probability that you're going to take it as your second Princeps trait,
it's almost a no-brainer.
It's almost a no-brainer. However, the things that come to my head, Tritonus's forgot the name of the trait.
Master of Arachnos or whatever it's called.
No, the one that is this but light. No, nothing.
Yeah, that you can swap in the What are you talking?
No, Princeps trait essentially that lets them. I think it's like called Tactical Genius or something like that, and it lets you re-roll your initiative roll every turn. But if you do it, you sacrifice giving an order to your Princeps. So what I'm trying to get at is there are traits that exist like it, but there are you're paying for those drawbacks, like you were saying earlier with the extra heat. You're paying there by losing your Princeps' order, or the ability to give your Princeps an order if you choose to activate it.
And if you take those two in direct comparison with one another, you've got one which works every time but isn't guaranteed, and you've got one which is guaranteed. You can play once per game when you need it. There it is.
And that's the thing, right? Theoretically, in a dice game where you have to roll for outcomes, something that guarantees you an outcome is already magnitude stronger than anything you have to roll for. So I think definitely it needs looking at in terms of how it is played. I don't know whether it needs to be removed. I think it would be a lot less feels bad and a lot less toxic if it couldn't be used. If it had to be used within the stratagem phase and at the beginning when you're when you're sorting out initiative.
Again, like the reason that I'm quite pro removing it is to mix up the meta, rather than I particularly think that it's bad. I use it, and like you say, it's one of those things. Everyone has access to it. It's not like it's one particularly strong legio or something. Everyone has access to it, but the meta is very established, and it's another one of those things like Score to Settle where you're almost putting yourself at a disadvantage if you don't take it. It is something that probably only Vox Blackout might be the other one which could basically be put in this category, but it's a game-winning trait. It's a trait that wins games, and okay, you might not need it, but if you don't need it, then you're probably doing pretty well for yourself. Whereas when you do need it, or when you need to stop somebody doing what they need to do, it's there, and you can go. It's just a nope card, and it is frustrating to play against, and it is, like you say, a feels bad kind of moment. Obviously, like I just always take it. I don't ever feel bad about it. It's part of the game, right? You expect it to happen, and if you've got somebody, you know what traits they've got, so you can know to expect it. But it still can be a bit frustrating.
Yeah. I think you would kind of view it in the same lens as a tournament pattern Warhound, where it's just been so entrenched in the game for so long, and like almost always been the meta, almost always been run all the time, that you just accept it as part of the, there is a 80% chance that I'm going to go up against someone with a a tournament pattern Warhound, and their princeps has probably got, or one of their princesses has probably got a dominant strategist. That, but you're not being surprised. You're not, you're not being interrupted mid-turn if you make those changes, and it's a lot more bearable.
Okay, let's while we're on the subject, we've been talking about Vox Blackout. Let's move on to the next one, which is something that did come up in the last Beachheads when we ran, but the question which we are now starting to see is Vox Blackout should still allow me to use my turn 1 stratagems. Now, we always historically said that was how it would work. And the reason why we did that was because you had blind hands, you had 5 cards that you could choose from. And if somebody played Vox Blackout and you had taken even just one or two turn 1 stratagems, you then have basically lost parts of your cards. The game, that part of your hand, the game has changed now. There is a thing called stratagem hands, which allows you to have more cards than you need to play, and you can play up to a certain amount, and it's open information. Now, when that came in, we reverted back to Vox Blackout is now, read the card. That's what it says on the card. If you play it in turn 1, no turn 1 stratagem cards can be played from that point onwards. What side are you coming down on this, Johnny? Or do you want to come down on this?
I have personal beef with Vox Blackout, and I think it's
ever since that moment in the bat rep.
Yeah. But in all seriousness, though, I think, and as someone that's massively against axing stuff from games and heavily FAQing, if there is anything that should be cut from the game, I think Vox Blackout should. I just don't think it's fun. I don't think it is a good play experience. Being able to just be like, denied. No, you're not doing that. You're not having fun with that. I'm just going to, instead of a stratagem that helps me win, it's something that stops my enemy or my opponent from playing the game. It obviously slightly melodramatic, but you get the point. It is not it is truly a toxic a toxic stratagem. Even
So I can understand that point of view, right? It used to be 1 stratagem point, which is insane when you think about it from that perspective. But it is now 3 stratagem points. So at best case, if you're playing 2000, that's half of your stratagem points in 1 hit, right? And there's the obvious, play later on where you don't want charges to get off or what have you. You don't want people to be plotting down Stygian Veils, or whatever. So you're still paying 3, a big chunk of change for that. And yes, it does stop that. But it's particularly spicy when you play it in the first round because you can stop those turn 1 stratagem cards like War March from being played. My opinion of this, and I'll come down on this, and you can probably argue for why it should allow you to have your turn 1 based on what you're saying. My opinion of this is that if you base your entire strategy around getting some of those first turn stratagems out, and you're telegraphing that information to your opponent that you've got all of these turn 1 stratagems, you are asking to be turn 1 blackout. Not because there's a particular advantage in stopping you doing orders or anything, but your entire strategy has been hinged around that. If you can't build a stratagem hand to account for this is my preferred way of playing, and I'll use these stratagems, and these are the 3 that I'm going to use, or 2 I'm going to use on turn 1. However, if I don't do that, then I will. I have these other stratagem cards here which I can use instead, right? You should have redundancies built in, and you shouldn't expect an opponent to let you play the game how you want to play it. Okay, so what I've done today is my Warlord's the typical one, right? Warlord, I'm going to take, he's got 2 plasma, Sun Fury plasmas, and he's got Gatlings up top. Okay, I'm going to take overcharged cannon. No, experimental weapon. Okay, those two have got maximal, which means that now my Gatling is maximal fire. So I've now got strength 7 Gatlings on top. Okay, great. I'm now going to spend another 2 points to put overcharged cannon on that, which means that now those Gatlings are strength 9, right? With 12 dice, strength 9. Okay, maximal fire is going to probably like burn through quite a bit of your reactor doing so, but that is a strategy which people have on Apox as well. You see it often, to really boost. That's 4 stratagem points. That is a combination which can be insanely good. If you saw that was the combination that somebody had in their stratagems, then you are going to go, right, I'll turn one blackout then, I'm going to stop you. You can't then be like buttsore and like upset when your that your opponent has done that and you don't have a second option available to you to play your game. So that is why I think that it should be left as rules as written, and turn one blackout stops the phase and you don't get any opportunity to play those again.
Here's why you're wrong. Okay, so a few things here. It is another one of those things that is at odds with your previous takes on other things such as a score to settle, where if this is true, there is absolutely no reason to not have Vox Blackout in your stratagem hands. Full stop.
I think it's definitely an auto take.
Everyone should be taking that as an auto take, but as we've discussed, auto takes are bad. I think that there is, if you are front loading a shit ton of stratagems on the first turn to play a certain play style, then you are telegraphing this to your opponent, whether your opponent has Vox Blackout or not. You are dumping so many SP into this beginning strategy that you are severely hindering yourself to be flexible throughout the game because you've spent all of it up front to play a very specific play style. And then if, for example, of your souped up warlord, you are putting all your eggs into one basket, and if that thing dies, then there goes most of your investment in the game. I think that there is nothing lamer than countering your opponent's play by just playing a card, and that's it. Because they can't play those cards again because they are first turn only cards.
So do you think that this debate scales though with the amount of points that you're playing with? Because if you're playing at 1750, you have 5 stratagem points to spend, and Vox Blackout is then 3 of them. So you've spent 3 points to deny your opponent from maybe spending 4.
Yeah,
but they've still got 4 points that they can spend with their other things. You've already used 3 of your stratagem points to deny them from spending. Let's say it was only done to do War March, right? 3 for 3. But they've got options available to them to do other things with those stratagem points available. Whereas you've actually now only got 2 to spend for the rest of the game. So you are at a disadvantage.
But they've got less stratagems to pick from. If we're specifically talking about a situation where there are first-turn game-altering stratagems.
Is that not really... Does that not come down to ensuring that you're picking the right stratagems as part of your stratagem hand to make sure you have, at minimum, the amount of points available to you with your other cards to still get your full amount of SPs throughout that, with things which are usable like concealment barrages, tracer clouds, things like well, my mind's gone blank now, but there's so many other useful stratagems which could be used every single turn that you don't need. Like your argument there about like you're putting yourself at a disadvantage because you're dumping loads of points in there, sure, but that's because you're choosing to play that way. Being denied that, you basically have more options available to you than your opponent does. You've made them spend 3 of their strategy points, and that in itself, I would think about using that as a strategy in itself to force a first turn blackout.
See now, but this is the thing, right? Why are we building? Right, okay. I hate Vox Blackout so much. Why are we building a list? Firstly, you build a list. When you build a list, you also build your stratagem hand. That is part of your list building. Okay, your stratagems are as much part of your list as your Titans are. They should complement your list. The strategies should pass over. So being told basically at the beginning of the game, fuck you, you're not playing this way, you're playing how I want you to play. Sure, yeah, it is. Oh, you're not, you're playing against your opponent. It's like your plans are foiled first contact with the enemy, but that's insanely lame compared to actually, dismantling your opponent's plans through playing the game and countering
the argument
them.
is exactly the same if you flip it round.
But why though? Because if you want to,
why should I know that I'm going to have a bad time against your list because you've dumped a load of points to make like some Death Star unit.
True, but you can't. That's the thing though. I don't think even with the experimental weapon and all of that added onto a Titan, I still don't think it would have as much of an impact on a single facet of the game. To the point where your opponent wouldn't be able to deal with it with the normal tools that they would have in a generic all-rounders
War
list.
March, everything can move.
Right.
All of a sudden, like that top hat example is just an example I'm aware of, right? But you those other turn 1 strats, like Mortis's War March, all of a sudden, that your opponent, who is a close combat monster, let's say, is now 8 inches further up the board than they were before.
Yeah, but if I'm a Mortis player, I want to use War March because it's fucking cool. But if everyone's bringing Vox Blackout because there's no reason not to, because it is essentially a counter spell. Yes, it's expensive, but also if you fuck your opponent's plans from turn 1 potentially. I don't think it is. I don't think it is good fun in a game interaction.
I think I've ever seen you this animated, Johnny.
That has stuck with me. That Vox Blackout into my Volpa charge has stuck with me throughout history. Go and watch that battle report if you want to see me emotionally die over the course of battle rep and then interject with some wine drinking.
Like dominant strategist, it can be a feel bad, right? But at least with dominance with Vox Blackout, there is a penalty because it's expensive to play. And this is what I said about does it scale? Because I think at 1750, it's much bigger consideration to spend over half of your stratagem points than at 2000, where you've still got 3 points left, which could be, a concealment barrage, a score to settle later on in the game, and a blind barrage or something.
So, if you're allowing Vox Blackout and you're acknowledging that it is half your points, and you're being left with 1 or 2 points or 3 points, whatever, right? Then does that then not make the tertiary objectives, a score to settle, a lot more palatable? Because then you're also then spending another stratagem point on getting the chance of getting 5 points. I just
and here we come back to the problem.
Here
right?
we come back to the
one
problem.
thing,
right?
You
exactly.
move the dial.
Because in my mind, it is insane that we would remove a score to settle for the chance of getting 5 tertiary objective points over touching something that is just a no roll required, just a do not pass go, do not collect £200, fuck off and play the game how I want you to play it. No fun allowed for you, no charges, no none of that. I just think it is such a if you react to my telegraphed opening hand, but you do it by playing the game and you know what my score is because I've laid bare my plans to you turn 1, which is either soup up this warlord or XYZ, right? Whatever my starting opening turn 1 stratagems are. you know exactly what game you're in for, and now you have shown your hand early. You are at a disadvantage because you've spent all your points on all of these. You're now many points down. Your opponent still has potentially their full selection of stratagem points, and they know roughly your game plan, which is, for the example we have today, walking your souped up warlord halfway up the board and shooting everything within range.
So the TLDR on this segment of the podcast is you're putting forward the case of, yes, it should still allow me to use my first turn stratagem, but preferably it should just be removed from the game.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. I just don't think it's fun, and I don't think there is a reason to have it whatsoever.
I mean, I use it. It's a tool, right? I don't think it's as bad as some things. Like I used my first Vortex missile at the last event, and that made me feel dirty. But I don't think there's going to be anybody who can realistically say to you, like, yes, I use Vox Blackout, and like I don't feel a little bit of remorse about using it, because it is another gotcha moment, right? And I think this is the hot take of all of these things. Like the things which are most evocative are these gotcha moments. There's a lot less of them now, but it's the gotcha moments which cause the feel bad, which makes people get annoyed and not having a good time. So your Vox Blackouts, your dominant strategists. We made a ruling on warp displacement not being able to be used as an interrupt based on community feedback, and also based on feedback from the FAQ team at GW, although they've never made it official because it was just a live chat guide, but whatever. But again, that was another thing which was a feel bad. It left you thinking like, well, that's ridiculous. So yeah, I think that it's an evocative subject. I'd be surprised if anybody feels like, or hasn't walked away from at least one game having played Vox Blackout and felt bad about doing it. But it's part of the game. That is where it is. I'm looking at this list, Johnny, and thinking we are not going to get through all of these particular subjects before the end of the show tonight.
I think we could rattle through a couple of them quite quickly.
Which ones do you want to do next?
Direbombs should be banned. No. It's just no. It's ridiculous. Sure.
So for those of you who don't know what it is, because you might not have come across a direbomb, it's something which is becoming more and more common in the meta and has been pretty established now for a couple of years. This is a direwolf which is kitted out as cheaply as possible, so it has the volcano cannon up top, and then you kit it out with a load of corruptions. Well, you kit it out with overwhelming rage to allow it to auto pass charges, and you give it organic protrusions to mean that it's smash attacks. You're always getting the full amount of smash attacks, and then you combine that with a bunch of stratagems. So it's usually things like warp displacement is the big one, to get you additional distance up the board. You might use it as well, although not necessarily all the time, war lust to give you an additional 2 inches of boosted speed. You then use unbridled hatred, the traitor allegiance ability, to give you another 2 inches of movement, and effectively it means that direwolf can charge something like 20 inches. Like certainly 15 to 16 inches is comfortable. It all comes down to really that warp displacement range that you roll. Like I've seen like a 22-inch charge pulled off at one of our events. Granted, you won't get the additional dice for warp displacement because it's not part of the charge movement, but he was still getting something like six or seven dice charging into a wall, and it just deleted a warlord. Like turn one, did that, charged, deleted a warlord. All for, I think they come in at about 275 points for the point side of it, but then you've got all of those other abilities on top against it. They are a horrible thing to play against. they can be another feel bad moment when people do that against you, and the fact that they can stalk as well, which means that they can basically be set up anywhere on the board. It's as long as they're behind 50% cover, but they're not restricted to your opponent's deployment zone. Means that you can basically turn one, have one of these in your flank straight away. And I think that is really the area of contention with this, is that they can just do it from anywhere on the board. Would it be less impactful if they had to be deployed in the normal deployment zone? Maybe, but if you're facing against dire bomb, you should be able. Well, you should do your utmost best to try and make sure that there's not 50% cover that it can hide behind.
Yeah, I mean,
within the restrictions of the game that you're playing, I guess.
Here's the thing, right? Sure, it's obnoxious, and it was obnoxious when it was new. But you are seeing the stratagems, you are seeing the list, you are seeing the moment you start seeing corruptions on a direwolf that aren't anything to do with shooting, you know exactly what's going to be coming at you, and you should deploy accordingly. And I just don't.
Do you not think, though, that this links back to the exact argument that we just had about Vox Blackout, right?
No.
Should you just let yourself be charged?
Because you need to roll dice to actually... You need to actually take part in the game to pull off this crazy maneuver.
Not necessarily, and it's not... you'll have already...
It's not guaranteed on every board, and it's not guaranteed against every list.
It's not guaranteed on every board, but you will have a good idea at the start of the game if you need to be rolling dice to get that charge off, because you might not even need a dice roll, or
you're still smash attacking.
You are still smash attacking, but you are, you're getting the full amount of dice possible out of that.
There should be screening. There should be positioning.
If they're in a ferox, you're hitting on threes.
You should have the opponent. It should be the opponent's responsibility to deploy against the possibility that a direwolf is going to come up and instant transmission across the board and slap your warlord in the face. Not saying it's not obnoxious, and it's a bit gamey. As much as I love the idea of the corrupted Titan, this is what I want melee reavers to be feared by, right? Like this is the kind of fun that but the direwolf is a shooting platform, so it feels a bit gamey. Like, as much as I love my corruptions, it's never something I would run, because it feels a bit silly. But I don't think it is a bannable offense, and I think the more people go up against it, the more people learn how to deal with it. I think it's not going to be as obnoxious going forward.
I don't think you can allow the dire bomb to exist without Vox Blackout. I don't think that you should be expected as a loyalist player to just suck up a charge like that, or the potential threat of a charge like that. Because even if it doesn't happen on turn one, it could happen at any point in the game, and it could just come out of nowhere.
True. But you've also got Concealment Barrage. You've also got is it Earthshaker that hurts the lighter Titans on the legs.
It can do, and it moves them. But all of this,
there are options. Obviously, it's not as cut and dry as Vox Blackout, but that is why I don't like Vox Blackout.
Sabotage is the other obvious one that you could do.
Right. Yeah.
But even then, there's a 1 in 6 chance that they'll still charge.
Sure, but there are ways. And if this, again, your opponent is putting a lot of eggs into one basket on a direwolf, which isn't going to survive, even if it does manage to kill one of your things, you're going to trade. So if it takes out, if you screen your more expensive pieces with warhounds or knights, even better, suddenly the idea that this direwolf is going to charge into a group of Cerastus knights is like, okay, cool. It's going to die. You spend 3 stratagem points on it.
Even if that direwolf does get taken down, you've only lost 275 points.
Plus the stratagem points you've...
But those stratagem points, only if you haven't used them, those stratagem points and those unbridled hatred is still transferable and useful and usable on anything else in your battle group. It's not like the turn 1 stratagem where you've gone, okay, that particular Titan I'm upgrading with 4 points worth of strats. You could warp displace something else. The game that we played against the Direwolf, two of the games in the doubles, and again, you can have a look at the Noosphere if you want to have the recap of that. But there was a Claw Lord, and there was a Direbomb. So we knew that even if we took out the Direbomb, there was still a chance, and a good chance, that that Warlord would have used all of those abilities to do the same thing. Mm-hmm. So there was a real kind of split as to what do we do. And in the end, we focused down the Direbomb because we knew the threat that it would be, and we were able to take it out a little bit easier because it's obviously a much lighter platform than the Warlord. But we were lucky on both games that the deployment meant that he couldn't get right up in our grill. But if that hadn't have been the case, then it would have been pretty nasty. Mm. It's a feel bad thing, right? It's like you say, it's not very fluffy. It's but is that enough to say that you shouldn't take them? I don't think
worth remembering the limitations of charge as well. Like if there is a lot of, it really should be up to a tournament organizer as well to make sure that the boards aren't susceptible to being abused by a Direbomb. Again, you're charging in a straight line. You can't turn corners. If you've made a web of buildings, it shouldn't be a guarantee for every single game, and that's why I don't think it is a bannable offense. I really thought this was going to be a quick one, but
no. But the way you get around this, right, is we decided that we wanted to see what the game would be like without Direbombs in the last beachhead, and it was a consideration. But that's why we could, not just that, but some of the other things which have caused questions in the past led to us creating this era's concepts. And so if you're not going to allow the Direbomb, you shouldn't just restrict the Direbomb, but instead, think about it a bit more openly. Like, okay, well, this is going to be early war, so no corruptions at all, and no Psi Titans, no vortex missiles.
And guess what? Everyone and their nan brings bloody Warlord Titans in every list.
I think that the Warlord prevalence was partly to do with the amount of points. Like we are getting kind of more like higher on the points than we were before. Like and also the missions. I think like this is one of the reasons why for September we want to reintroduce some missions from Open Engine War. They were much more about maneuver. They were much more about contesting objectives, pushing up the battlefield. And you both had the same objective that you had to play, whereas in Match Play Guide, it's great because it's asynchronous, but it also means that there's no real, negative to taking a Warlord list because you just play the game and choose the missions which are ideal for your particular list, which is great for that player agency. But another reason why we saw probably more of a swing towards certain Legios, certain Maniples, who were just took an Extergimus and are very good, at doing the Extergimus thing. Your defenses, your Restorums, your Furians, your Presagius, your Ignatum, like all of those very, very good platforms and for an Extergimus list. But yeah, what's your thoughts on a Direbomb? Use them or lose them, I guess. They're part of the game now, I think, and that's what people like running them. Like we faced two of them over the weekends. We didn't get charged once by them, but then they took a lot of managing to get to that. So, like I say, at least with that, it is telegraphed. You know what to expect, and you just have to plan as best as you can through your own positioning, screening, all of that kind of stuff, perhaps to stop and protect your own lines.
It will get easier with time.
Yeah. I guess the major sore point is that if you're not allowing Psi Titans, there isn't much in the way of counter for the loyalists to do that sort of stuff. And I think we'll end the night tonight by addressing that particular big item of
the psychic fawn in our sides,
which is the beast known as the Psi Titan. I saw a discussion on 8028. Somebody was discussing about how you could build a maniple for 3 Psi Titans, and I threw up in my mouth a little bit at the concept of more than one of those on the board at any one time. But yeah, the concept Psi Titans too powerful, they feel bad, they should be banned. Like there is very much a call for kind of like the problem with Psi Titans is, and at the doubles event I went to, they weren't restricted, but nobody took them. There was a bit of self-regulation, I think, on this, because I've seen this happen before. People have won, and they've won because and they've taken Psi Titans, and then what everybody is saying is like, of course they won, they took Psi Titans, and it diminishes kind of the experience of winning. And it's like, oh yeah, well, if they'd have had a different list, they hadn't taken Psi Titans, and probably wouldn't have. Like, there's a lot of focus on that being, the crux of of why people win. And I'm glad that when we went there, we won games, but we were even joking about it, saying like, well, at least we placed, and we weren't those guys taking a Psi Titan in our list. But then if you're allowing corruption, Psi Titans really, similar to like the argument about Vox Blackout, should you not take a Psi Titan because it feels bad, or does it just feel particularly bad because they're so much better against traitors who are corrupted?
Yeah. So here's my take. I think Psi Titans are strong, corruption or not, right? I think even if they're going up against uncorrupted foes, their innate trickery that they can do, and the what is it, the tenebrosum blah 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 mind gun is very
the left hand of darkness or whatever it's called.
Yeah, whatever pig Latin that they've assigned to it is very strong regardless of things. I think it is good that the loyalists have something to counter my much beloved mutations, because they can be incredibly obnoxious at times, and I think it is good to have something to balance that out. I don't know. I don't think you should be taking more than one. I think there should be.
Normally, you can't, can you? Like they are restricted for a normal battle group to only one.
Yeah, but like in the case of like doubles and stuff like that, like there should always only ever be one on a side.
There can only be one.
There can only be one. Just because they are so well tuned. But I don't think they are. I think it would be insane if someone, and as someone that has run all mutations list, I think it would be insane to say that they're good against traitors because traitors take mutations, because actually you don't take mutations in every Titan. I think it is a dangerous trap.
They're good against anybody. I mean, they're still strength 10 against everybody else for all of the abilities with warp.
I wish they were more like still extremely good against mutations, but then like not as crazy good against just normal stuff. But the fact that they're good against normal stuff, maybe community shame is the only feasible way that this can be. This can be balanced. If you there's also the push, the accolade, if people are bringing Psi Titans, is to go, okay, well, I'm gonna take my list to this event. I'm not gonna take a Psi Titan, and I'm gonna win it, because I don't think they are, by any means an auto win. They're just very good, just really well costed.
They're 700 points, so they are quite a lot more expensive than a normal warlord. But they do die pretty much just as easily as a normal warlord,
which isn't that easy, really.
It isn't that easy, but like they can be focused down. The thing is you need to address it before it becomes a concern. And there's just like the weapons loadout. The weapon loadout isn't set other than the left hand of darkness is. You have to take that. But the other weapons can be kind of whatever you want. So missiles on top, or bellicoses, or sea beamers, or what. I think they'd probably be less obnoxious if you were forced to take the claw. as the second option, which is how you see them in all the images. If you were forced to take that, then I think it would be very, very different how they would feel. But the fact you can double it up with a Sinistramus or whatever they're called, and a Sea Beamer, and then maybe some Apox on the top or something, they're a very, very good platform. But then you've also got all of their psychic abilities as well. Like, most of them are kind of fine, but the quickening one I particularly like, which is that allows you to move and turn as if you were boosted in the movement phase, and shoot a weapon without the Psi trait. So again, that would, if you just had a claw on the right hand side, that would just be your missiles, but that could be a Sea Beamer shot in a movement phase. It's like a super first fire order, basically. But Antipathic Tempest is the one which is probably the thing which causes the most frustration. It's a concussive Psi quake attack, which is just, it hits. You pick a point on the board that you can see. There's not even a measurement behind it, and it hits everything within 3 inches of that point with a strength 8 hit. The strength 8 hit is kind of whatever. It's the quake and the concussive that goes with it that's the important thing. It's obviously going straight through your shields, so concussive is happening. If you've got people bunched together, you can cause collisions that way. And best case scenario, you quake them. So now they're moving half movement and if you're doing that, I think that happens in the movement phase, then they are quaked from that movement phase all the way up until next turn.
Mm-hmm.
So it's insanely powerful to be able to do that with no range limitation behind it.
And I think that's why they feel especially bad, is that there is this like unwritten rule, agreement, whatever, in 80. Everything is this, at the end of the day, is the same chassis, or the same 3 or 4 chassis, right? You've got your Warhound and variants, your Reaver and variants, and your Warlord and variants. But the Psi Titan doesn't feel like a variant, because unlike everything else, where no matter what traits or anything that you take with them, they are going to do the same things each turn, right? They're going to follow the same gameplay constraints. When you start throwing in psychic shenanigans with just one unit in the game, it feels bad. I don't know where. I don't think it is bad enough to outright ban it, but it is a very strong unit.
What would you rather take, 2 Reavers or 1 Psi Titan?
That's the thing. I don't know.
I think I'd rather take 1 Psi Titan.
Yeah, which is crazy to say, because every logical part of my brain is saying, well, you've got 2 Reavers, that's 2 separate health pools. That's more, you have to chew through a lot more shields. That's potentially double the guns, but just the flexibility and the single kind of focused lens of strength from the Psi Titan, I think, yeah.
So I'm going to play devil's advocate and say that I think that they're fine, even though I don't think they're fine. But on the flip side of it is, why should the traitors have the fun with the mutations and the loyalists get nothing? This is the only thing other than vortex missiles which have been restricted to 1 per mana pool now as well. You don't restrict mutations to 1 per mana pool, although the vortex missile can be quite powerful. It is a lot less powerful than it was when it first came out, but it's the only thing which they have available. And to counter stuff like the Diabomb and all of those shenanigans that traitor players can have, like, this is one of the few kind of direct counters to mutation shenanigans that the loyalists have available to them. I think, in my mind, you could possibly make one change to the Psi Titan, and I think it would be less gnarly than it kind of feels like it could be. Maybe you just say that you do one of 2 things. You either say there's no additional bonus to attack corrupted Titans, or you reduce its base strength of that gun down by maybe 1 to make it strength 9 against everybody else, same as a Quake, or strength 11 against mutations.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if you made that kind of change, it would probably be less oppressive. But like I say, at the end of the day, it's 700 points. It's a proper Death Star thing, similar to the examples that we said at the beginning, that dies just as easily as any warlord. If you came across an Extergimus, first thing you would do is first fire everything, and you would take those shields down turn 1, and you would try and kill that thing as fast as you possibly could, and then that's 700 points in one place. And worst case scenario, okay, I'm going to stick a concealment barrage in front of it. Okay, beam to an extent, right, is going to cause problems with things like that, or blind barrages, but you just throw everything on it and try and mitigate it as much as possible. You throw down a tracer cloud on top of it, and okay, it might move, but with quickening, or depending what it's going to do, but re-roll all of your hits against it.
Yeah,
there's so many ways that you can kind of counter it, but there's no denying it's a nasty platform. Whether or not that is as nasty as some of the combos that you can get on the traitor side or not, I'm not sure. I think it's just become a bit of a meme in the community, I think. And
I quite like your solution of the forced loadout with the Ariok Power Claw. I think
that would make a big difference. But you don't, people are kind of moaning about die bombs and stuff, but one die bomb at 270 points could take out a Psi Titan.
Very true. Yeah.
For more than double its points.
I mean, again, the stars would have to align, but it's not impossible.
So are we being a bit harsh on the Psi Titan by saying that it's it's almost kind of got this, well, it has got a reputation of being a fun sink?
I think in general, it is very easy to look at the top lists of tournaments and see that they've all got dire bombs, or they've all got Psi Titans, or they've all got XYZ, and go, these must be really, really powerful. I think it's very, very easy to fall into that trap because all of the good players are taking it. Whereas I think all of the good players are taking it because it is statistically more reliable. But if you were to give that list, or a Psi Titan centered list, to someone that isn't a top placer at a tournament, and then you were to give the list that they would run to someone that is a top placer at a tournament, I don't think stuff like the Diabomb, I don't think stuff like the Psi Titan is strong enough to, as set pieces, to change that game in any way, in any meaningful way, to actually bring a win. And I think that the better player, quote unquote, would still win in those situations. I don't think either of those things, whether it's the Diabomb or the Psi Titan, are strong enough to solo carry a game for someone. They are just, very reliable pieces that experienced players know that they can,
it'll win
trust. More. Yeah. In the right hands.
It's a way of making good players better rather than making everybody unstoppable.
Exactly, because that's the other thing as well. Like, back to your point about the two Reavers, aside from a top player, I think the better option for most, mid-table competitive or just non-competitive people, in any case, would always be, even if you're up against traitors primarily, would always be two Reavers over a Psi Titan. But if we talk about, let's say Stu, for example, because he's a great AT player.
Don't feed
Stu
his ego too much.
It's just pot kettle black. Stu would, I feel, would be able to make more out of a Psi Titan than those two reavers.
100%. Yeah, I think there definitely is an element of that. But on that bombshell, I think we will draw this episode and draw the court to close. and yeah, let us know what you thought about it. I really enjoyed that. That was good fun.
It's good chat.
It took way longer than I thought it was going to. And we've still got other questions like we want to discuss, like whether, War Masters are too expensive, neutron lasers being too powerful, vortex missiles should be restricted to one per battle group, loads of things which we didn't, even kind of get to talk about. What are the things which are kind of coming up in your metas and the things that you're concerned about, or the things that you keep bumping up against? Do let us know in the comments, and do give us an old like and a subscribe and all of that nonsense. And if you want to throw a couple of quid our way, please look at the Patreon or YouTube members to get our latest Newsphere. So the next episode of Newsphere will probably be out in about a couple of weeks as we stagger them in between our main podcast episodes. And yeah, it's been another good night. Thank you for tuning in, guys. We will see you again next time, and always remember to go big, go loud, and
go to court.
Lame.
Copyright strike.